We're continuing with our series on great themes of Leil HaSeder and Pesach. One of the central part, at least the central piece of Leil HaSeder is unfortunately missing. We don't have a Korban Pesach. Now I want to discuss with Rav Lichtenstein a bit about the centrality of the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach seems to be a unique Korban. It's got this focus on it being eaten only in families. You have to be monoi on the Korban Pesach to take part in it. It's one of the only two mitzvahs aseh which if you don't do, you're chayav koros, Korban Pesach and bris milah. And it has all these extra rules which we don't find with many other korbanos. So what is the uniqueness of Korban Pesach, and what is its centrality to Leil HaSeder?
Obviously, our contemporary Seder is lacking, as you said, the central component. Pesach, in time of the Mikdash, look very different. We'd all be in Yerushalayim, we'd all be eating a Korban Pesach. The whole dynamic, the time frame of the Seder would certainly be very different, undoubtedly. To discuss the centrality of the Korban Pesach, you asked about its uniqueness more vis-a-vis other korbanos, which would require getting to a long discussion of coaching, which I'm not sure is the current format is designed for that. So let me therefore more focus upon Korban Pesach's role in Leil HaSeder. Korban Pesach has a dual element to it. It really has a double kiyum. It's a classic brisker kind of mitzvah, if you want. And let's go back for a moment to what we discussed in the previous installment about the Arba Lashonos of Geula. Arba Lashonos of Geula have a dual element to them. V'otzeiti, v'itzalti, v'ga'alti. I will redeem you from Egypt, from the suffering, from the bondage. Secondly, v'lakachti etchem li la'am. It will also, because Baruch Hu chooses Am Yisrael, B'chiras Yisrael occurs in Mitzrayim. V'lakachti etchem li la'am. Korban Pesach tries to embody both of these elements. It has on one level a kiyum of Yitzias Mitzrayim. It goes hand in hand with the matzah. You eat the Korban Pesach at night, and you could illustrate this halakhically to the fact that you have to eat until chatzos. You can't eat it later on. There's no other korban which chatzos is the time. All the korbanos you can eat until the morning. And there are famous discussions in Achronim that indeed qua korban you could actually eat it all evening long. Only qua zechet yes mitzrayim it has to be eaten before chatzot, and
Because Yitzias Mitzrayim was at chatzos.
Right, because all the mitzvahs yes mitzrayim are at chatzos. That was at midnight, and so part of it embodies simply this is part of recollecting and reenacting what happened in Egypt. In Egypt, we brought the Korban Pesach, and this was an essential part of the miracle. Right, we ensconced ourselves in these homes. We put the blood on the doorposts. This is Pesach, right? Pesach is Shepasach HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'tei B'nei Yisrael, because Baruch Hu, He skipped over our homes. This is Pesach. Korban Pesach embodies Pesach, and therefore has many halachot which really belong to chametz and matzah, and that's why you can't have chametz, right? That's also, at least in the Psukim, a unique halacha that Korban Pesach has a lav of chametz with it. However,
Don't all korbanos have a love of chametz with it?
No, I mean the ownership and possession.
Okay.
And, the Gemara talks about Korban Tamid, but whoever's interested should look that up on his own. Now, there's an additional element. Korban Pesach embodies B'chiras Yisrael. And or to put it differently, rather than matzah being its referent, it's milah. Korban Pesach and Bris Milah have much in common, as you mentioned before, the fact that it's punishable by kares. Actually, to say it's punishable is a misnomer. It's not really a punishment. Right? There are 37 aveiros, right, sins, which a person gets a punishment of kares. That's called banishment, whatever. You banish him from the land of life, whatever, however we translate that.
Do another interview on that.
But Pesach and Mila, many people have commented upon this, and it's I think, very convincing theory. It's not a punishment. It's simply you can't exist without being connected to Kadosh Baruch Hu. If I don't plug the cord into the socket, I won't have electricity. The light bulb will go out if it's unplugged.
It's a consequence as opposed to a cause, of course.
It's a consequence as opposed to a punishment. And therefore, you cease to exist if you are no longer connected to Baruch Hu. What connects you? Mila connects the individual. Pesach connects the tzibur, Am Yisrael as a nation or as a community is connected through the Korban Pesach, which is probably the reason why you need a chabur, you need a group. Matter of fact, one opinion Tanaim, it's a machloket, claims that there's a special prohibition, there's a lav of being a Korban Pesach as an individual. Lo tuchal lizbach Pesach be'echad she'arecha. You cannot offer the Pesach in one of your dwellings. So it's interpreted, Lo tuchal lizbach Pesach, be'echad. You can't bring the Pesach as an individual. It's part of it's a communal offering.
You've also got the opposite, no? That Yachol Kol Yisrael Yotzim B'Pesach Echad.
But there's a
Everyone can do
I forget, Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Yehuda, one of them claims you cannot bring us a yach, it's a lav. Now, so the Pesach therefore also includes within it elements of bris. To be short and concise and without going to all the halakhic manifestations of this, in a nutshell you could say like this: the slaughtering, the offering of the Pesach, or the Maisa Krava of the Pesach, is the bris. The Achilas Pesach is the Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. So basically you have, now the punishment or the consequence of kares is not if you don't eat. A person brings a Korban Pesach, he is part of the group, and he then doesn't eat, he doesn't have kares. Because the kares is on the bris. And that relates to what he does on the 14th in the afternoon. We actually bring the Korban before Yetzias Mitzrayim. It can't commemorate Yetzias Mitzrayim if it's brought before. It has to have an element of a bris. On the other hand, the Achila is done at night. Korbanos are usually not at night. Right? The Kiyum of Korban is during the day. The Korban is at night because it's really a mitzvah of Leil Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now you have a question, I'll just mention this, whether the focus of the Korban is the actual mitzvah sakrava, the offering the actual Korban, or is it eating it? The Mishnah says in Pesach, in Daf Ayin Vav, that the Pesach lo ba mitchilas l'shem achila. The Pesach is designated to be eaten. Rashi, now the question which remains, is it exclusively for that, only to be eaten, or also for that? Meaning it has two goals. But the reason the Pesach is so crucial, Pesach night, is because of this. It commemorates both elements. What do we do nowadays without the Korban? First of all, of course, we have to keep in our mind. Always remember what we're lacking. A matter of fact, a few years ago, someone came and offered me to go bake matzahs Erev Pesach. It's a minhag which is done, Rashi thought it's a din, not a minhag. According to Rashi, matzah to bake Erev Pesach. And it's an attempt, the rationale of doing that is to view the matzah replacing the Pesach. Rashi thought not only eating the matzah replaces the Pesach, but also baking the matzah replaces the bringing the Korban. For 2-3 years I went, assuming of course that I was able to fit this into family chores, and I think obviously, taking care of family chores is more important than a minhag or a hidur, or to put it differently, the is more important than my personal private minhag. But then I stopped. Even when I had time Erev Pesach, I decided it would be more meaningful to spend the time studying Hilchos Korban Pesach and to delve into the sugyas of Pesach Sheni, of Korban Pesach, rather than baking matzahs, because baking matzahs is a bit far-fetched as a form of Korban Pesach. However, Rashi does claim much more convincingly that eating the matzah Pesach night should be a commemoration of the Korban Pesach. So we come to eat them, and the reason is very simple. As said before, Korban Pesach has a dual element. It's both analogous to Milah, or it partners with Milah, I should say better. The partner with Milah is the akrava, and just 1 second, is the akrava in the afternoon. Baking matzah doesn't partner with Milah. However, at night it partners with matzah. Eating matzah partners with the Pesach. So this is one form that we should try to keep in our mind. Namely, first of all, just have the recognition. Study Yichus Korban Pesach, remember it. And of course, Rabbi Gavriel forces us to do this. Number two, when you eat the matzah, keep in mind in your consciousness that you're eating also the Pesach. The third point, of course, is that the Magid, yes, the Magid will have a more central place when you lack a korban. We do with our mouth what we cannot do with our bodies. I mentioned this in the previous installment. Part of the beauty of Pesach is that the body is so active. On Korban Pesach, we take a hit.
So, focusing on one point which you raised about how the second element of Korban Pesach, it's kind of like a kind of bris for all of Am Yisrael. Presumably that's also why an Oral can't eat the Korban Pesach. He has to do his personal bris before he does his bris as part of all of Am Yisrael. We find throughout Tanakh at various kind of crucial turning points in Jewish history, with Yoshua, with Chizkiyahu, with Yoshio, I'm probably missing a few, we find that there's a description of a kind of mass Korban Pesach which Am Yisrael did together. Does Rosh Yeshiva mind relating to that a bit and maybe tying it back to the previous point?
I'll be brief. As you said, it seems quite convincing that the reason Korban Pesach is such a major focus by Yoshiyahu. I mean, there are many mitzvahs. He could have, we don't hear about many other mitzvahs, which is because Pesach is really a new breed. And that Yoshiyahu's whole, everything he's focused upon is one thing. Is Avodah Zarah has basically been a violation of the bris. And the Torah describes as the end of Sefer Dvarim that Avodah Zarah is a violation, it's betrayal. Avodah Zarah, the metaphor Tanakh uses constantly, a wife who's betrayed her husband. And it's like it's a marriage which has fallen apart. It appears throughout Nach often. Like a prompt example is Yirmiyahu Paragimel. Like Yirmiyahu describes an unfaithful wife. Can she dare return to her husband? And this is what Yoshiyahu is facing. There's been a violation. Avodah Zarah, the marriage has fallen apart, and the way to do it is to recreate the marriage. I think Shashim does this also. Shashim describes also the need to reenact and to reestablish a marriage, and in different ways. But that's part of the reason we read Shashirim, because this idea of Pesach is Am Yisrael and Kodesh Baruch Hu are a dod and a ra'aya, a lover and a beloved, and we have to describe the courtship and also how they come together. And Yeshua realized when the marriage was dissolved or betrayed, he had to reestablish. And the Pesach is the medium or the means to reestablish the breed.
And Yoshua, it just occurred to me now while the Rosh Yeshiva was speaking, Yoshua must have been pretty much the only person who saw Yetzias Mitzrayim and did the Korban Pesach in Eretz Yisrael. That's the first Korban Pesach in Eretz Yisrael.
Maybe Kalev
also. But those two are probably must have been a magical evening in itself. Presumably, there's a description of Korban Pesach when they get to Eretz Yisrael for the same reason. This is the first bris.
I think the answer is indeed so. Presumably, they come to serve this idea of a brit, and of course, by Yeshua, it goes together with the bris milah, which has to be also reestablished for whatever reason. And because this element, yes, Tanakh takes Pesach to be so meaningful, and that's its place.